Ferguson, Missouri has been in the news since last August when police officer Darren Wilson shot and killed 18-year-old Michael Brown. The shooting led to a further investigation of police practices in the town, and it didn't take long to reveal that the police department has a long record of targeting African Americans for traffic stops, for fines, and for arrests. Now, if it was only a problem in Ferguson, the city could clean house and the rest of us could move on, but unfortunately, discriminatory and often racist police behavior like this is all too common. There are many more Fergusons out there, plenty of them right here in Arizona, and we need to address the problem on the local and on the national level. Now, the Department of Justice investigated the Ferguson Police Department, and it published its findings listing general problems and citing statistics and examples to back up its case. It's not a pretty picture, believe me. For me as an educator, though, the two parts of the reports that jumped out were the examples of the police behavior towards young people. The police often used abusive, aggressive, sometimes even illegal methods to deal with reasonably minor incidences involving juveniles both in and out of school. This is a pattern, it's part of law enforcement that leads to a problem that's usually called school to prison pipeline. When juveniles get involved in the criminal justice system, their lives are changed, often dramatically, and usually for the worse. Their chances of staying in school and graduating drop, so do their chances of finding good jobs as adults, and they're far more likely to spend time in court, in jail, and in prison. Arrest and incarceration should be the last option when police are dealing with young people who often act out and do things that are illegal because they're young, because they're trying things out, because they're testing the limits, because they're struggling to learn what it means to be an adult. Most people grow out of those behaviors when they reach adulthood, but when they're arrested, instead of being dealt with in a way that's appropriate to their age, they get caught up in a web of the criminal justice system, and sometimes they can't find their way out. So let's look at the Ferguson report. Let me begin with an example where two African American girls were arrested after school. First, let's look at what they were charged with by the police, then we'll look at the incident. They were charged with disorderly conduct, manner of walking, failure to comply with a police order, interference with a police officer, assault of a police officer, and endangering the welfare of a child. Well, with so many charges and such serious charges, you'd expect these two girls must have been involved in some really dangerous criminal behavior that had to be dealt with swiftly and severely. I'll let you judge whether that was the case here. The whole thing began as what the officer described as play fighting. Here's how it's written up in the Ferguson report. In February 2014, officers responded to a group of African American teenage girls play fighting, in the words of the officer, in an intersection after school. When one of the schoolgirls gave the middle finger to the white witness who had called the police, an officer ordered her over to him. One of the girl's friends accompanied her, though the friend had the right to be present and observe the situation. Indeed, the offense reports include no facts suggesting a safety concern posed by her presence. The officers ordered her to leave and then attempted to arrest her when she refused. Officers used force to arrest the friend as she pulled away. When the first girl grabbed an officer's shoulder, they used force to arrest her as well. That's the situation. Here are the reasons the officers gave for the charges against against both girls. The disorderly conduct charge was because one girl gave the finger to the bystander and used bad language. Failure to comply, that charge, that was the girl exercising her legal right to follow her friend and observe what the officers were doing. And when they were charged with endangering the welfare of a child, amazingly, they were the children whose welfare the officers claimed were being endangered. When police were called to the scene, they should have done what they could to quiet things down. Instead, they created the situation that led to the charges. Here's the conclusion in the Ferguson report about what happened. This incident underscores how officers' unlawful response to activity protected by the First Amendment can quickly escalate to physical resistance, resulting in additional force, additional charges, and increasing the risk of injury to officers and members of the public alike. These two girls were thrown into the criminal justice system for play fighting with their friends due to the officers overreacting to a minor incident. What happened here happens all too often. Incidents like this result in court appearances, fines, even jail time, and a criminal label attached to people, either in the form of an actual criminal record or simply the attitude of friends, teachers, and others in the community. The Ferguson Police Department stations school resource officers in 2 of the city's schools, and that's common practice in lots of communities, including here in Tucson. TUSD has resource officers in some of its schools. Ideally, those officers are there to provide a safe and secure learning environment for the students. They should be easing the relationship between the police and the community, promoting greater trust with the students and opening lines of communication by being helpful, not punitive. But too often in Ferguson, according to the report, the resource officers, and this is a quote, treat routine discipline issues as criminal matters and use force when communication and de-escalation techniques would likely resolve the conflict. One instance mentioned in the report was when 2 15-year-old African-American girls were fighting during class. Now, clearly, the girls were in the wrong. They were way out of line. They shouldn't have been fighting in class, but there's no way that should have qualified as criminal behavior. Well, the resource officer's role should have been to help the teacher defuse the situation and, if necessary, escort the girls down to the office. But by the time the officer was through, both girls were charged with peace disturbance, and one was charged with failure to comply and resisting arrest. In another incident, a 14-year-old African-American middle school boy refused to leave the classroom after he got into a minor argument with another student. According to the report, the situation escalated, resulting in the student being drive-stunned with an electronic control weapon in the classroom. That means they used a stun gun on him, a taser. And the school seeking a 100-day suspension, in other words, a year-long suspension for the student. Situations like these happen when a police force is trained to have a zero-tolerance policy where every bad action is considered cause for intervention, detention, and arrest. The blame goes less to the officers themselves and more to the training they receive from their superiors. It's the police department and criminal justice system that encourages and rewards this kind of behavior from the officers. Now, it's a serious problem when these kinds of tactics are used against adults, especially when the tactics have a racial bias, as so often happens. But when young people are involved, officers need to exercise special care to do what a situation necessitates, and nothing more.